Funding for this edition of State of Affairs with Steve Adubato has been provided by Bank of America, Suez North America, Delta Dental of New Jersey. Everyone deserves a healthy smile. The Healthcare Foundation of New Jersey, the Northward Center, Johnson & Johnson, the New Jersey Education Association, NJM Insurance Group, serving New Jersey's drivers, homeowners, and business owners for more than 100 years. And by the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, moving the region through air, land, rail, and sea. Promotional support provided by bestofnj.com, all New Jersey in one place. And by the New Jersey Business and Industry Association.
Hi, I'm Steve Adubato. We kick off this very special edition of Think Tank here on News 12 Plus with our good friend Bob Garrett, who is the CEO of Hackensack Meridian Health. Good to see you, Bob.
Good to see you too, Steve.
People are about to see a Think Tank program, and one of our featured guests is David Perlin, who is the Chief Scientific Officer and Senior Vice President of Hackensack Meridian Health, also leading the Center for Discovery and Innovation. Let everyone know what the center is and why it matters now more than ever.
Yeah, so the Center for Discovery and Innovation is a major research hub for not just Hackensack Meridian Health, but for the state of New Jersey, and it's actually received a lot of national recognition as well, Steve. You know, they've really been I would call it instrumental and real game changers during the COVID era. You know, as an example, they at the Center for Discovery and Innovation, they developed the first COVID-19 commercial rapid test only 8 days into the pandemic, which was an incredible tool for clinicians that were really waiting weeks. If you remember at the beginning for COVID-19 results, weeks were reduced to literally hours. They developed at the Center for Discovery and Innovation a convalescent plasma program in conjunction with clinicians at the John Theurer Cancer Center. That program where recovering COVID patients were able to give their plasma to sick COVID patients really made a difference in thousands of people's lives and saved hundreds of lives early on in the pandemic. And then
was that the 60 Minutes story, Bob? Sorry again for interrupting. 60 Minutes did a feature on that, correct? Go to 60 Minutes to see that story. That was a story, right?
That was a story on 60 Minutes, featured David Perlin and all the great work they're doing. Michelle Donato at the John Theurer Cancer Center, great shout out to her because she was tremendous during that process. Also, vaccine development. The Center for Discovery and Innovation really was on the forefront of vaccine development. Give you a couple examples with the Pfizer vaccine. The Pfizer folks really worked in our labs at the Center for Discovery and Innovation. We provided data analytics to them before they submitted their vaccine to the FDA. We also were one of the first to participate in both the Moderna and J&J clinical trials at Hackensack Meridian Health. And then the last thing I'll say, you know, the CDI, the Center for Discovery and Innovation, to this day is making a huge difference. They're sequencing the variant in real time so that clinicians can know in pretty short order if a patient comes in with one variant versus another, which might call for a different type of clinical treatment protocol.
Bob Garrett has set it up well. This is a very special edition of Think Tank right here on News 12 Plus. You'll see David Perlin from the HMH, Hackensack Meridian Health Center for Discovery and Innovation. Bob, thank you for setting the tone and teeing up, to make a football reference, teeing up this Think Tank show. Thanks, Bob.
My pleasure, Steve.
Without further ado, Think Tank. We are honored to be joined by our longtime friend, Dr. Lamont Repollet, president of Kean University and a former commissioner of education in the great state of New Jersey. Mr. President, thank you for joining us.
No, Steve, thank you very much. It's my honor and privilege to be on your show as always, and it's great to see you, my friend.
Absolutely. Hey, listen, we're taping this end of January 2022. Describe for us, big picture, what you believe 2 years plus into this COVID pandemic, global pandemic, has done to higher education forever?
It's changed the landscape, to be honest with you. I think that when it comes to higher education, everyone believes brick and mortar. Brick and mortar, whether it's from K to 12 or higher ed, brick and mortar was the gold standard. But for the last year and a half, in 18 to 22 months, you realize that we can actually operate in a virtual space. And I think that we must be learning how to collaborate more with one another to make sure that whatever the end goal is, the accomplishment, we can actually do it together. So I think if you're looking at partnerships and collaboration, flexibility, and opportunity and equity.
You know, Kean University, Governor Murphy designated Kean University the state's first urban research university. What does that mean, and why does that matter, Doctor?
It matters a lot for us. It changes the profile of Kean University. And two, it allows us to be considered a research university. However, not just a research university, Steve, but a research university that focuses on urban issues and urban-centered policies. And I think that's important. That's why. And with acquisition of the John S. Watson Institute of Public Policy and Research here at Kean University, they have a 30-year track record dealing with urban policies. They're a think tank, a think and do tank. So for us to have this designation, a research designation, allows our students to receive additional money when it comes to tag. That's important for us when it comes to access. But secondly, more importantly, raises the profile. You actually get more grant opportunities, Steve, when you're a research university. And I think that as we start to transition from your traditional liberal arts university to more of a research base, the opportunities for us to get more of competitive grants at the national state level is important for us, and also allows our faculty members to really have the flexibility to do research and focus on their research and have release time and have resources afforded them as a result of this designation.
Doctor, hold on. You said the John S. Watson. Is that the John Watson who was my mentor in the state legislature back in the day in the mid-'80s when I was there for a very brief period of time? Is that the John Watson?
Yes, it is. Yes,
is that Congresswoman Watson's father?
Yes, that's Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman's father, and the John S. Watson is named after him.
What's the connection? What's the connection to Kean?
Well, there's no connection to Kean except the fact of what Kean's mission. And I think for 30 years they've been at another institution in South down in Trenton, the Thomas Edison State University. And I think now is just looking at what we're trying to do at Kean University and looking at an urban focus. I think it was a natural transition because, there's ebbs and flows in anything. And I think that the Watson family, named after, you said, your mentor, John S. Watson, also the first, I believe, African-American that led a budget appropriations in the nation, to be able to do that. And that's our way of honoring him. I think that they felt that, that Kean right now at this period of time, this period of time of social injustice and upheaval throughout the country, it's probably a good place for us to really be able to work together if we're trying to focus on solving issues in urban communities.
Yeah, two things. One, let's make sure we put up the Kean University website, but also Google John Watson, State Assemblyman John Watson. Not only was he, as Dr. Repollet said, the chair of the Assembly Budget, Finance, and Appropriation Committee, of which I was proud to serve on, but he chaired that committee with such distinction and class, and dealt with people who had all different perspectives and always respected their point of view, even if he didn't agree. And so I need to ask you this. There's a reason for this preamble. We're doing a series called Democracy at a Crossroads. When I think about John Watson, I think about someone who could disagree without being disagreeable. And our democracy is in danger right now. What is the role of Kean University and the higher ed community in promoting, if you will, civil discourse around incredibly difficult issues, Dr. Repollet?
Well, that's one thing that I think that I am just pleased to be affiliated and associated with John S. Watson, the family in general. I think Congresswoman Coleman and her family entrusted us to be able, as you said before, at a crossroads in higher ed right now. And I think as you're talking about these issues, I think we need to put these issues at the forefront. And I think Kean University is prepared right now to put these issues at the forefront. Our focus will be focused on urban-centered solutions. The fact that the John S. Watson Institute has a long-standing relationship with the New Jersey urban mayors make it just really a transition for us that's easier for us to give us, honestly, Steve, credibility in that space. And I think that we need to carry that mantle. So we're going to take what was given in regards to just the lens in which John S. Watson, you're looking at the lens of equity and social justice. And now we look at educational justice. So when you talk about higher education, social justice, education justice, you're looking at the Second Amendment, our students having the right to be able to civil, have core discourse. And we need to facilitate that. And I think for us, the training will be in public policy, really understand that place. I know that the legislature last year and the governor signed a bill in regards to putting civil courses on civil,
on civics. Understanding these issues of race and understanding our history. And by the way, it is not lost on me that over your right shoulder, that is not a virtual setting, this is your office. And we are taping this on the 18th of January. Yesterday was what it was and what it is. I see Dr. King behind you. That is not there by accident, and it has everything to do with what we're talking about. Is that right, Doctor? No, that is not there by accident. That's one of my heroes. I talked yesterday about, the quote from the Birmingham letters from Birmingham jail. What is it? Justice, injustice anywhere. It's injustice everywhere. So I think we really need to look at that quote. But it's intentional. I think that when you look at higher education now, things need to be intentional. Intentionality, meaning the work that we're doing, the practice, the policy, and also the performance, meaning the outcomes of what you get from there. So I think for us, having not just the symbol there, but it's the action. And I call it equity in action, Steve. Mr. President, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Dr. Repollet, we learned a lot from listening to you. You've challenged us. The challenge for Kean University is clear, and we look forward to future conversations together, particularly around public policy impacting disproportionately the urban communities in this state nation. Dr. Repollet, all the best to you and the Kean University family. Well, Steve, thank you very much for this opportunity. I appreciate you, and thank you, and I'll see you soon, okay? You got it. I'm Steve Adubato. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
To watch more State of Affairs with Steve Adubato, find us online and follow us on social media.
We are honored to be joined by the Honorable Mayor of Jersey City, Mayor Steven Fulop. Good to see you, Mr. Mayor.
Good to see you, Stephen. Good to be back on the show.
You're looking very casual and comfortable as we tape at the end of January 2022. But listen, you've learned a lot in the last 2 years about COVID, about leading the city in the midst of this crisis. Number one leadership lesson you've learned to date is last 2 years.
I think the last 2 years have strengthened our team and relying on some of the key leadership people here to kind of make decisions. And then, I think trusting data and science and making decisions, even at the time, if it feels like there's public sentiment that might be pushing back, that you got to have some courage in order to kind of do what you think is the right thing.
Speaking of the right thing, what exactly is the vaccine policy, first for public employees in Jersey City and then for the city itself?
Yeah, so what we've been trying to do is just replicate the state's policies. So, one of the things we've learned is that a patchwork of different policies around the state, municipality by municipality, is really counterproductive, and it's really confusing for people. So while we were at the forefront of vaccines and testing earlier in the pandemic, we've decided to just stay in line with the governor at this point, not create additional hurdles, require our employees to be tested or vaccinated consistent with the state, and not put additional requirements on the public right now either.
But in terms of public venues, I mean, we're interviewing the mayor of Newark, Ras Baraka, who you've worked with very closely for a long time. And I happen to go to the Prudential Center occasionally to see a basketball game. And as we speak right now, you must be vaccinated. You must show that you've been vaccinated to be there. In Jersey City, you do not have such a policy. Is that the kind of patchwork you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, look, the reality is when most of these municipalities at this point put requirements on a restaurant or a venue, they're not sending the police officers in. There's no mechanism to enforce it. So it doesn't really mean much other than, in theory, you're asking the venue to abide by that. And at this stage, everybody knows what they need to do and what they shouldn't be doing. And when you have one municipality saying, we want everybody to be vaccinated and show a card, you have another one, let's say like Union City or North Bergen, that says only in city properties, we want you to do X, Y, Z. And another one saying we're just going to be consistent with the state. It becomes very confusing for the public and counterproductive. So look, the majority of municipalities in New Jersey are in line with the governor. That's what we're going to do here in Jersey City.
Real quick on this. You compete with New York City right across, obviously, the Holland Tunnel. There you are, Jersey City versus Lower Manhattan. There's a policy. You can't go into a restaurant without showing vaccine, proof of vaccine. There are some who argue that the restaurant community is better equipped in New York, and some people feel safer because they know that if you're in there, you're there with people who are vaccinated. You don't buy that argument.
Well, I mean, I don't. People are making decisions every day, going to Target and the supermarket, making decisions that are responsible, that they view it that way. And like I said, a patchwork does not work. Every day there's different information coming out, which makes it more confusing. I mean, the latest is what type of mask is most effective? Should you wear an N95? Does a cloth mask work? If I require a cloth mask, does it do anything? All of that stuff undermines trust from the public. So from the Jersey City standpoint, we say, look, we're better off being in line with the municipality, with all the other municipalities, or the majority of them in New Jersey, and just making consistent so people understand what we're trying to do. One final point, Steve, on that is that if you look at our positive rates, fatality rates, or hospitalization rates in Jersey City right now versus the other municipalities that have put requirements on there, you'll see that we're exactly in line with everybody else. There's really no deviation on that. So what does that basically lead you to? That leads you to the conclusion that a patchwork of rules doesn't make a municipality safer. It actually just confuses the public.
And just remember, we're doing this at the end of January. You'll see the date up there. Yeah, it's a moving target, if you will. Mayor, help us on this. Crime in Jersey City, crime in urban America, particularly in the last couple of years. What is Vision Zero, and particularly as it relates to fighting crime in Jersey City?
Well, Vision Zero particularly deals with kind of fatalities on car crashes and making our streets safer. But, that's part of the challenges you see in an urban area. The other challenge is really gun violence and kind of the day-to-day struggles in more challenged economic areas. So, poverty and, mental issues and is really kind of leading to kind of a lot of the violence that we're seeing that's happening at younger and younger ages. So it's somewhere that Newark, Jersey City, Patterson all struggle. Every city in the state and country actually has struggled. And I don't think anybody's been able to really crack the code yet.
I'm going to talk to you about SciTech City in just a second, but I want to ask you this. We've decided to do a series that's simply called Democracy at a Crossroads. The graphic will be up on the screen as we talk. Do you think that's an appropriate title, Democracy at a Crossroads, or some have argued democracy in a very precarious, dangerous state? Which would you go with?
Look, I think.
How bad is it, Steve? How bad is it?
I think it's fair to say that it's in a dangerous predicament right now. I think that the advent of social media, how people consume their news, where the media has moved over the last 5-10 years and how they report, all of those things undermine trust in your institutions, and it is at a major crossroads. Everybody thinks that they're an expert in their particular opinion and have only strengthened and hardened their opinions, which basically stands to kind of undermine the foundation of this country. So I think it's fair to make it very, very strong and say, it's beyond the crossroads. It's at a dangerous predicament.
Yeah. Make sure, as we move forward,
Mr. Mayor. Tell you, it's not good. That's the bottom line.
No, I know it's not good. And we'll continue to have this discussion with you and folks with from all different political perspectives. Real quick, SciTech City, is it SciTech City? Is that right?
Yeah. So you're looking at, in the 1980s, Liberty Science Center was created. It's been one of the fastest growing museums actually in the country. When you look at attendance, we are expanding it with 18 acres and creating an entire science campus that will kind of be the laboratory of the future. So we have 3 Fortune 50 companies that are anchor institutions already. It's going to have an incubator space, a public high school, wet labs, and it's really going to take kind of the science campus there to the next level.
Before I let you go, what is the current population of Jersey City? I'm just curious about that.
It's 290,000 based on the last census, marginally smaller than Newark, and maybe we need a recount.
No, listen, don't talk about recounts because the 2020 election was already done and we already recounted. You may be wondering, it's the mayor's 9th year. He's the longest serving mayor of Jersey City, except for the let's say, former machine boss Frank Hague, if I have that right, and you are not a machine boss. I just want to clarify that.
Look,
we've been talking about this for almost a decade. You said it was going to be bigger than Newark. What happened?
Well, look, let me first say that the mayor of Newark has done a great job. That's a starting point there. So, I think the change in Newark was a positive, and I think he's done a terrific job there over the last couple of years, and it balanced out the growth a little bit. And, senses are, not perfect sciences. So I think ultimately we grew more than anybody else in New Jersey, but we still came up short, and that's okay. It's just bragging rights. I still think Jersey City is the best city in the country.
Mr. Mayor, confident of your city, but also very diplomatic. As always, Steve, great to have you with us. All the best to you and the folks in Jersey City. Thanks,
Hope
Steve.
to see you guys soon. Take care.
You got it. We'll be right back after this.
To watch more State of Affairs with Steve Adubato, find us online and follow us on social media.
We're now joined by Dr. David Perlin, who's Chief Scientific Officer, Senior Vice President of Hackensack Meridian Health, Center for Discovery and Innovation. Good to see you, David.
Good morning, Steve. Good to see you.
You were with us early on in the pandemic. We're taping this at the end of January 2022. Do you believe, from a scientific perspective, as much as you can know and the scientific community can know, will there be, quote, in your view, an end to COVID, or should we be talking about it differently?
I think we have to, I think for now we have to think about it a bit differently. We have to think about how do we adapt and how do we sort of resume our lives knowing that the virus is there. There will be new variants, that's a given, but that we have mitigation strategies and we can really coexist with this virus, and that's where we have to get to. And we may ultimately get to the point where the virus evolves sufficiently where it's highly transmissible, but it's causing less severe disease, and therefore it becomes more cold-like, and that's how we've adapted to it.
Yeah. A couple things. First, I want to disclose that I teach in the Hackensack Meridian Health Physician Leadership Academy, and I've gotten to know many of the physicians within the network, and we've talked about this extensively. But one of the things we do talk about in the Leadership Academy is communication. And I have to tell you, it's confusing, and it's turning into a leadership and communication case study, and I will not get on my soapbox here, David, but the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, as we speak, at the end of January, it is fair to say that the messaging has been confusing around the science and if that is the primary source we should be following. Has that not been confusing, A, and B, does it have to be that confusing?
It certainly has been confusing and does not need to be confusing. But, the CDC is very much focused on transmission and disease of severe disease that winds up filling our hospitals and causing morbidity and mortality, as we saw early in the pandemic. But we're at a state now where we have to really think about this disease and in sort of two ways. I mean, we have two very distinct populations. We have the unvaccinated, immunocompromised population, high risk of developing disease, hospitalization, potentially death. But this is the case for almost any highly infectious agent, whether it's influenza. We have high-risk populations. We recognize that. We have to address that high-risk population. Then we have those who are vaccinated, those with waning immunity, those who are boosted. They're at much lower risk of severe disease and morbidity and mortality. If we think about those two categories, then the CDC recommendations in terms of transmission and what we have to worry about, you have to understand where you fall. And once you do, then we can empower ourselves to employ disease risk mitigation strategies. First of all, get vaccinated. Wear a mask when you're in a situation where you're uncomfortable, and then fundamentally understand that if you do become ill and you're vaccinated, it is likely to be a very mild disease. If you're immunocompromised or unvaccinated and you become ill, it's potentially a more serious disease. But we have risk mitigation, meaning that we have antibodies, we have strategies to be able to deal with you. So the CDC is focused very much on transmission. And the problem, I believe, is that everyone believes that infection means disease, potential, high risk for hospitalization and mortality, and that's not the case today.
By the way, the Center for Discovery and Innovation, give me 30 seconds, give everyone 30 seconds on what it is and why it matters.
So the Center for Discovery and Innovation was created by Hackensack Meridian Health as a way to take high-end science and be able to take those innovations and move them rapidly into the clinic. And that's in the form of diagnostics, vaccines, therapeutics, changing standard of care. And so that's what we do.
Got it. And HMH is an underwriter of our healthcare programming, to disclose that. But quick follow-up on this. Discovery and innovation, science. Is it fair to say, because I was trying to understand the history of pandemics around the world and in our country 100 years ago plus, et cetera. Is it fair to say, Dr. Perlin, that, and can you say sometimes as a scientist in the scientific community, quote, we don't know. We don't know where this is going. Or is there a compelling pressure? Is there compelling pressure to have, you're smiling at me, to have answers, because we outside the scientific community are looking to science for the answers?
Well, the fundamental basis of science is we don't know. So as a scientist, we're asking questions that we can then test and then try to derive answers for. The reality is that when you're dealing with pandemics, when you're dealing with rapidly evolving viruses like this one, it's going to take different turns. And what you have to do is be able to adapt to that. So the answer is clearly, yes, we don't always know what the correct answer is, but what we have to do is look at the data and say, okay, here's what's going on. We now need to change. And so, unlike other professions where it's really important to be rock solid about how you approach, well, you know what? You may need to change your approach. And here's a real important fundamental in medicine. 5 years ago, the standard of care was different than it is today. And it was different 10 years ago. And 5 years from now, the standard of care, what we say is the gold standard, will also be different. So it's a moving target. So you have to evolve. And whether it's in the longer term for standard of care or short term, like in a pandemic where you're learning on the fly and you have to adapt your strategies for risk mitigation to help people get through it.
Real quick before I let you go, we end this program. Dr. Perlin, how optimistic are you about quote unquote therapeutics to treat COVID?
Oh, I'm very optimistic. I mean, we have two new FDA, EAU emergency use as we speak right now. So go ahead. Today we have two, but there are others in the pipeline, and there's now a new initiative to really up the number of antivirals that we have. And this is an important thing, that we put all our eggs in the vaccine basket. It was not the right thing to do. We needed to have more of an emphasis on therapeutics. And if you just look at influenza, we manage influenza through vaccines and through therapeutics. But there are diseases like hepatitis C, HIV, tuberculosis, which are only managed by drugs. So we need drugs in addition to vaccines, and then we need all the other risk mitigation strategies.
Dr. David Perlin, thank you so much. We're smarter just because we listen to you. Appreciate it. All the best, David.
All right, thanks, Steve.
I'm Steve Adubato. That's Dr. Perlin. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
State of Affairs with Steve Adubato is a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation. Funding has been provided by Bank of America, Suez North America, Delta Dental of New Jersey, the Healthcare Foundation of New Jersey, the Northward Center, Johnson & Johnson, the New Jersey Education Association, NJM Insurance Group, and by the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. Promotional support provided by bestofnj.com and by the New Jersey Business and Industry Association.
Many of New Jersey's children have been affected by COVID-19, But now that there's a safe and effective vaccine available for children ages 12 and older, you can help make COVID-19 history by getting yourself and your child vaccinated. Let's end this pandemic together and help all children get back to being kids. Visit HackensackMeridianHealth.org/COVID-19 to learn more or to schedule a vaccine appointment today.